Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Habitchonistim. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by Brigadier General Amir Avivi, the founder and chairman of IDSF. General, thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
I know you spent some time up north today. What can you share with us in terms of developments in this war?
Yeah, so I spent the whole day in the north, in the Northern Command, on the northern border. Actually, a few minutes before we arrived to Metula, there was a drone attack inside Metula. We were like 5 minutes from there. And unfortunately, we also have casualties. There was a massive shooting today towards the Golan Heights, following the IDF attacks inside Lebanon, some of them very deep inside Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah's positions and capabilities. Overall, the situation in the north is complicated, but the Northern Command is fully preparing for a possible war with Hezbollah, doing everything needed. I cannot go into details. There are many issues that the command is dealing with to prepare for a possible war, understanding that solving the issue of pushing Hezbollah north of the Litani, the chances to do it diplomatically exist, but are not very high, and we cannot have a reality as we're having at the moment. Many citizens displaced. So definitely there is a lot of preparations and processes that the Northern Command is going through in order to be able to move from 0 to 100 if needed, if there is a decision at a certain point to launch a full-scale attack into Lebanon.
General, what would you say is the main threat in the north right now? Is it missiles or is it an October 7th type infiltration?
Well, the chances of infiltration are less high than they were at the beginning, because at the beginning there were many thousands of Hezbollah terrorists really deployed along the border. The IDF constantly pushed them back. Many of them went even further than the Litani. Others are situated between 8 to 10, 12 kilometers from the border. So I'm not saying there cannot be some kind of ground activity, but it's much less of a problem. The challenges are more, really the problematic attacks we saw lately were with drones, explosive drones, and also, of course, the rocket shooting. And I would say that maybe the two more complicated issues are drones and anti-tank missiles. Rockets is something that overall Iron Dome deals with very well. So really, this is why Hezbollah is very focused on launching explosive drones and shooting anti-tank missiles directly at houses and positions along the northern border.
The resolution 1701, does that have any bearing on what's happening? Meaning, if somehow Israel can push Hezbollah back, will that avoid war? Or because of that drone and missile threat, it really doesn't make much difference?
So the resolution was passed after the second Lebanese war in 2006 by the UN Council, but was never implemented. So Israel has, of course, a strong demand that this will be implemented, but again, it's not easy to get Hezbollah to withdraw without really doing it militarily. So we'll see now where this is going, talking about what's going in the south, how will Hezbollah react to that. But I think that I see at least the Northern Command very resolute in the need to push Hezbollah north of the Litani, all of them.
And what is the status right now with all of the civilians up on the Lebanon border? You mentioned the attack that just happened in Metula. Are the civilians still there?
So most of them are not there. There are roughly 80,000 citizens that were evacuated from their homes. All of them, since the 7th of October, are in hotels all over Israel. There are towns that are dispersed in many different hotels. Unfortunately, many people, because they don't know what's happening and they have to plan what to do with the kids and schools and so on. So people, some of them got fed up with hotels, are hiring apartments in the center of Israel. And I know several people who are saying, we are not going back. We are now getting used to life in the center. And this is very, very bad news, talking about the importance of settling the land, and especially in the north and in the south. And the more it's prolonged, the more there is no solution, the worse the situation becomes. And the less is the chance that some of the people will go back. This is why we cannot sustain a reality like that. We need to be proactive and do something about that.
I know in the past you've spoken about how settling the land is not a liability for the IDF and for Israel's security, but it's an asset. Can you just repeat that idea to our viewers so they understand the importance of civilians in that area?
So I'll give an example from the Negev and from the Galil. In 2.5 years ago, in Operation Guardians of the Wall, the road between Beersheba and Dimona, two main cities in the Negev, was blocked for 3 days. Bedouins blocked the road, and this, of course, created a very serious problem. People could not drive between the cities, but not only that, the army was not able to bring munitions to the most strategic Air Force base in the Negev, to Nevatim. The Nevatim was under siege for 3 days back in the Negev, not in the Lebanon or in. The question is why? Why specifically this road was blocked? And the answer is simple. No Jewish towns along the road. Without Jewish towns, there is no security. Now I'll give an example from the Galil. One of the major generals in the army, who was in charge of all the logistics, really taking care of moving the whole IDF from the bases in the south to the north for a war in Lebanon. He finished his position and it was interviewed in one of the newspapers. Very normal interview, nothing special. But the interview became viral. And the reason was that this general that was in charge of all this logistic operation, he said, in a war in Lebanon, when we have to mobilize the whole army from south to north, we won't go through Road 65, road of Wadi Ara in the Galil. Now we have to understand there are only 2 roads that go from the center to the north. One is Wadi Ara, and the other one is called Wadi Milek. Only 2 roads. How can you say that the whole army will be mobilized in one road? It doesn't make sense. And then the question is, why? Why is he saying that? I mean, we're talking about the road to Afula. It's a main road in Israel. And the reason why he said that is that in this road, there are no Jewish towns. All the towns are Arabic, Israeli Arabs, by the way. I'm not talking about Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. So in the Negev, we were talking about Israeli Bedouins. In the Galil, Israeli Arabs. Of course, I can give many examples also in Judea and Samaria. But the idea is the same idea. In places where you don't have Jewish towns, Jewish settlements, you don't have security. Now, on the 7th of October, if the towns had weapons the way they should have had, everything would have looked different. They would have been able to stop the attack, the towns, not the army. So having towns along the border, this is security. Now, what I'm saying here, this is not a concept developed by Bitchonistim, by IDSF. This is basic Zionism. This is Ben Gurion. This is what people did during 100 years of Zionism. And for some reason, somehow, in the last 10, 20, 30 years, a new thinking came saying, no, you know, this is a modern country. We cannot think in these terms anymore. We are like the US or a European country. What do citizens have to do with security? And we see everything when it comes to the land of Israel.
You know, we haven't spoken in a while about the National Guard. Do you have any updates to share in terms of activating civilians to be more involved in security like that on a national level?
So one thing that almost instantly happened in the 7th of October, and this is part of the concept of a National Guard, is that immediately in every single town and city in Israel, in all Jewish towns and cities, immediately the people build response teams. Whether they were organized in a small town, one big team, or in Tel Aviv, for example, different neighborhoods building their own security group, and the country weaponized them. The police, the Ministry of Internal Security, they bought all the equipment and also weapons, and weaponized all these different, I would say, kind of militias, local militias. And the whole country now is built in a way that in every single town and city, we have forces ready to defend, and it's all based on the civilians. This is not the army, and it's not the police. It's civilians. This is the National Guard. This is the basic concept of building a National Guard. Around that, of course, there is a lot to do. And the ministry, the terror security, is dealing with all the issues around that. But the basic concept has happened since the 7th of October. I live, for example, in Caesarea. Caesarea, maybe my town, by the way, we didn't have even one alert the whole war. Nothing happened. No rockets, nothing. No attacks. And in my town, more than 70 people in this response team that organized. Everybody was really worried, and we have a very strong team. So imagine how it looks in a town that is near Arab towns along Judea and Samaria, or in the north, or in the south, or in the Negev. So this is to get an idea of how towns affect national security.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's go to Hezbollah for a moment before we focus on what's happening in Gaza. Last question with regards to Hezbollah. The direct attack from Iran to Israel, has that changed at all the perspective on how to deal with Hezbollah, or it's separate?
Well, the army, as we are operating in Gaza, and we'll soon talk about Gaza, has built all the operational ideas how to deal with Hezbollah. And as I said before, there are many, many different preparations that the army is doing for a possible war in the north, might be imminent. And I think that our commanders have gained huge experience, and the level of readiness, of course, is very, very high for such a scenario.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk now about Gaza. The National Security Advisor, Tzachi Hanegbi, recently said that the Rafa operation has been ordered, and we could expect to see it very soon. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I think that there is a clear understanding that Hamas is not going to negotiate, is not going to release the hostages. That's just stalling. They have been stalling for months now. And that there is a need to move forward and not lose momentum and do the ground incursion in Rafah. So the army spread flyers and ordered the society, the Palestinian citizens to move out of Rafah to designated areas where they can be safe. And this is undergoing. There are a few 100,000 that already left Rafah and others that are living now. The army is in full readiness for the ground incursion. And now we see how much time they give to the people to move out of Rafah. And I think that soon enough, we'll see the army mobilized and we'll start seeing the defining battle in our goal to destroy Hamas as a governmental and military entity.
Does the operation in Rafah look different than in the rest of Gaza? This is their final stand. Is it much more dangerous as a result?
So definitely, because it's the final stand, we expect them to fight fiercely. We know that they have really fortified Rafah in a very meaningful way. So anybody who says we should consider maybe pinpointing, doing something small, going in and out, other ideas that I hear, this is completely disconnected from the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that this is a fortress. There are 4 battalions inside Rafah. Many of the other capabilities were in Gaza. They retreated to Rafah. All the leadership is there. Our hostages are there. So I expect to see a full-scale attack with the Air Force and artillery and tanks and APCs. Because if we don't do that, our soldiers are going to be in danger. We have to reach the Egyptian border. We have to find all the tunnels along the border and destroy them. We have to look and find where the leadership of Hamas is, and also the hostages. So there are many dramatic things that are going to happen in Rafah that we didn't see before. Why? Because they retreated constantly. Asked the IDF to cover all the other areas, and now they cannot retreat anymore. That's it. That's the last stand, and everything will happen in Rafah.
And is there likelihood that they could retreat into the Sinai Peninsula?
It's definitely an option. It's something that should worry us. We might see leadership of Hamas, even with hostages, trying to flee into the Sinai Peninsula to Egyptian territory. I think this, of course, is problematic. Israel is trying to coordinate as best as possible with the Egyptians to try and avoid a scenario like that. But I don't know how much we can trust what happens on the other side. And this is why every minute we wait just creates a bigger danger. We really need to go in and finish the job, find our hostages, and kill the leadership of Hamas. And of course, destroy their military capabilities.
And once that operation starts, what do you think the timeline is for finishing up in Rafah?
It's hard to say because it depends how fierce is the fighting, what we encounter there. Might take a few weeks, maybe a bit more. We want to do it very systematically. We want to do it in a way that we're not endangering the soldiers by going too fast. We have to be systematic. So I would guess that probably it will take a month and a half, maybe more, unless there is a collapse. If they collapse and surrender, then it might be a different reality.
I just want to pause here for a moment and share with our viewers that, as we noted, next week is Yom HaZikaron, is Israel's Memorial Day, and we have a very special film planned for that day. And we are looking for sponsors to help us fund this film. If you'd like to sponsor the film, the link is in the chat. It will be a very meaningful and important tribute to the soldiers, the citizens who have fallen in defense of Israel. So please, everyone, check out the link in the chat. We'll make sure it goes out in the email and the WhatsApp as well. General, today, as you know, is Yom HaShoah, is Holocaust Memorial Day here in Israel. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are in terms of comparing October 7th to the Holocaust. All day on the radio today, they had Holocaust survivors. Some of them saw tremendous similarities. Some of them saw them as very different events. What are your thoughts?
Well, what I'm thinking is, I think the day itself, the 7th of October, it felt like Holocaust. Children hiding in closets, women being raped and massacred, beheading heads. It was a really, really terrible day. For many hours, people were defenseless, and they didn't have the army arriving on time. It took time, but we're not living in times of Holocaust. We are a strong country, able to defend itself. I remember when I did my bachelor's degree, I studied American history and political science, and I wrote a paper on what was the US policy towards Jews that managed to escape and came with ships seeking asylum in the US. At that time, all the ships were turned back, and these Jews were sent back to die in Europe. And even the West didn't help us at that terrible moment. And when we are fighting now an existential war, when we are fighting a war we're not winning against Hamas, might be devastating for the state of Israel, being threatened not to be assisted if we go into Raffah, especially when I connect it to Holocaust Day. To me, it really feels terrible, terrible. I would expect the US, especially the Western society, especially looking at what happened to the Jewish people, to stand strong with us when we face this kind of threats, and really assist us in every way possible. And this is, I think, a big, big moral test for the US, for the US administration, for the Western society, the way they treat Israel in a moment where, again, we are surrounded by enemies, where, again, people want to annihilate us, including Iran with nuclear aspirations and a clock set to a date when Israel will cease to exist. I think that in this context, there is still a lot to do, understanding the lessons that we need to learn from the Holocaust.
You know, you have fought anti-Semitism and Jew hatred professionally as a leader, as a general in the IDF. The message of never again, that the slogan people throw around for the, to remember the Holocaust, that the atrocities should never happen again. Do you think the world has learned that lesson? Do you think this many years after the Holocaust, we're at a place of more tolerance and understanding, or things are unraveling and we just haven't learned, the world hasn't learned?
I think that the more we distance ourselves from the Holocaust, the faster people forget. I can say that today, the young generation in the world, and also in the Western society, many of them haven't heard about the Holocaust. Doesn't mean anything to them. People today can easily compare the Holocaust with the fighting in Gaza and say, okay, Israel is doing, God forbid, Holocaust in Gaza, and believe it. I mean, really be disconnected from what Holocaust was and what we are doing. And I think that's the one thing we can really influence when we say never again is talking about our ability to defend ourselves by ourselves. This is the biggest lesson for the Jewish people. This is all what Zionism is all about. It's about not just building a national state for the Jewish people in the land of Israel, but it's also having in this state the abilities to defend ourselves by ourselves. And when we look at this war, we're not there. It's not possible that 2 weeks after the war starts, we need to beg for munitions. This is not how the Jewish people should be organized to defend themselves. And I think there are big lessons learned about what our capabilities should be, our industries, our military industries. It's really about our policies. It's everything we can do. We can really build the capabilities needed to sustain wars. Yes, we need allies, and we need the US to be a strategic ally and friend, but we cannot be dependent. Cannot be dependent on really fighting on the ground. And I think that one thing I learned looking at international relations is that at the end of the day, when you are strong, you'll have strong international relations. It's when you are weak that then you find yourself also challenged by the international community. With Jewish people cannot be weak. We don't have this, we cannot allow ourselves to be weak again. So I'm hoping we do the right things to strengthen our society, our military, our economy, our technology in a way that will be safe for generations.
Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for sharing that important lesson. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.